Getting your focus right is the most important thing that you need to do in landscape photography. And if you're anything like me, you probably already know the focus frustrations that can be involved with getting your focus properly sharp when you are in the field. Well, in this video, I'm going to be showing you the very easy, simple steps to create perfectly tack sharp focus images when you're using Lightroom and Photoshop, how to create those from start to finish. Hey everybody, and welcome into the channel. My name's David Johnston. I help you improve your landscape photography with online videos. So if you're new here, if you're into landscape photography, be sure you subscribe to the channel and also ring the notification bell for more videos on how you can take better photos in the future. Now in this video, I'm going to be showing you the process of going from Lightroom to Photoshop and how to create tack sharp images using focus stacking. If you think about focus, it's the most important thing you can do for your landscape photography to ensure you have a successful image, because if you print an image that you take in the field, but the focus is off, it's not going to do very well. Focus is one of the things that is absolutely impossible to fix in post-processing. So you want to be sure you get it right in the field. Now, there's a lot to say on overcomplicating the process when you are shooting it in the field. Really, the only thing that you absolutely need is a tripod. You can use any camera, any lens, but you have to have a tripod to be sure that every frame that you take lines up with the one before. So when you are lining up the shot, all you're doing is you're taking multiple focus ranges throughout your scene, whether that be a big landscape scene that you just take 2 frames, one for the foreground, one for the background, or this can be something as complicated as an intimate small scene in landscape photography that has several frames that you take to be sure that you get tack sharp focus in every sliver of the frame that you then stack together using focus stacking. That's one of the kinds of images that I'm going to be showing you how to do in this video. But remember, you can use the same process when you are doing a large, grand landscape and having a big foreground and having that focus stacked with a background as well. So on my computer screen, you're gonna see a series of images that I photographed of a group of trees in East Tennessee. And I really like how these trees lined up in the frame and how they accentuate one another and how there's repeating patterns throughout the composition. Now, to get this right, since you are working with various focal lengths throughout the image, I did have to focus stack this. And if you'll notice, one of these frames here is just my hand over the lens. That's a really good pro tip for when you are in the field, because I can't tell you how many times I've brought the images over in post-processing and been like, where does this sequence start? Where does it end? I can't really tell. After I take a sequence of images, I always hold my hand over the end of the frame to be sure that I know where the next sequence is going to begin and have that as kind of a divider shot in there. So here's the first sequence that I tried to get in just 2 frames. And if you'll see, the front tree is in focus, but the rest are not. And I just couldn't get every single tree trunk in focus with these 2 photos. Even though I'm shooting at 1/3 of a second f/14 ISO 100, that f/14 isn't capable of getting everything in focus because I am so close to that first tree. So I'm going to have to use multiple frames here, more than just 2. So that's why I have the subdivider of my hand, and then you'll see through these images, as we go through them, each level of focus varies from first tree throughout the sequence of trees to get that back tree in focus. So the 2 that I'm being sure that I get into focus here are this first tree, and then going through the middle trees in here, and then the back tree in the very far back. Now, as I scroll through these, you can see some slight jumping within the frame. That's okay. Even though that I was using a tripod, sometimes when you're adjusting your focus ring, you can hit your camera just enough, especially with small scenes like this, to knock your alignment off just a little bit. I'm gonna show you how to fix it. It's a really minor problem that's a really easy fix later. So basically when you're starting this process off, you just take the first image in the sequence and you go to the develop module here, and you're just gonna edit these photos like you normally would in Lightroom, depending on whatever style you like to choose. Now, since this has a lot of texture, I'm just gonna be sure and accentuate that. So I'm just gonna get the exposure where I want it to be, maybe increase some contrast, bring up some highlights and drop the shadows a bit to create more of that contrast. And let's just add some clarity to really bring out the texture in that tree. And then also adding a little bit of texture slider as well. I never like to overdo the texture slider because it is kind of a overdone effect at times. What I'll do next is add a little bit of color here, so some vibrance and some saturation to bring out those greens and yellows. And then since the greens aren't as green as I want them to be, maybe I will green those up with the green hue slider, and also the yellow, I'll bring that up and make that a little bit more green to make those pop and make it way more mossy looking rather than yellow looking. So that's kind of where I want the image to be right now. Now, I'm not going to do this in every single photograph. So to quickly edit these, since I'm not adjusting my composition or lighting or anything like that, same settings throughout the entire sequence. What I'm going to do is just go back to library, go back to my library grid view, have the first image selected, hold down the shift key, select the last one, and go to sync settings. Now, when this window comes up, since I didn't do any crop or anything like that, or any local adjustments on my photograph, I'm just gonna hit check all and synchronize. And that's gonna apply every single one of those edits that I made to the first photo to every single photo in the sequence, so that I don't have to go through and match the lighting when I am just shifting sliders like that. Now that all those settings are applied to each and every photograph, I'm gonna keep that same image selection, and I'm gonna right click, I'm gonna go to Edit In, and I'm gonna go to Open as Layers in Photoshop. Now, the reason I select Open as Layers in Photoshop instead of just Open in Photoshop is because I don't want each file opened in Photoshop in a separate window. I wanna have these all open as layers so that they're in one single file, and then I can adjust those and stack them together using the focus stacking feature in Photoshop. Once all those are loaded into Photoshop, you can see those as layers in the bottom right portion of your screen, all 4 frames lined up as layers. So with that first layer selected, to begin the blending process, I'm gonna hold down my shift key just like we did in Lightroom and select the last one as well. This is gonna be ensuring that every single thing that I do in the alignment and blending is done to every layer and not one is left out. This is very important. So then I'm going to go to Edit, I'm going to go to Auto Align Layers. This is going to fix that problem that we had that I showed you back in Lightroom, where every single frame was slightly off in the composition because when I did touch my focus ring, it knocked that adjustment off just slightly enough to be impactful. I want to be sure that every single tree is lined up perfectly, and Photoshop does a really good job of fixing this when you do make that mistake in the field. So I'm just gonna hit Auto Align Layers. Now I even do this if I'm sure that I do have alignment perfect, but just in case, I always do Auto Projection and hit OK, and then Photoshop is going to start lining those hard edges up within the frame so that they can be sure that they are lined up in every single blend when we do blend these together. Once that finishes, I'm going to be sure that all my layers are still selected. If they're not, just reselect them and jump back in the process. So with them all selected, I'm just going to go back to Edit, and I'm going to go to Auto Blend Layers. Now you have 2 different options here. Panorama obviously is to create a panorama, and it auto blends those into a panoramic image. But since we're doing focus stacking, I'm just gonna click on Stack Images with Seamless Tones and Colors and Content Aware Fill Transparent Areas. And I'm just gonna hit OK. And it's gonna actually start masking out some of the areas that aren't in focus to reveal the areas that are in focus behind it in those other frames that we shot. So as you'll see here in this blend, we have each layer revealing and concealing specific parts with these layer masks down here. And with one click of a button, we did that. We don't have to manually mask these things in. We can just run this script in Photoshop to auto-generate this focus stacking feature, and I've never had issue with it. It's always done an exceptional job, perfectly sharp images throughout the entire frame. If you want more tutorials on how you can improve your photos using Lightroom and Photoshop, I have those on the screen right now for you to check out and watch at your own leisure. Thanks for stopping by. Remember to subscribe, like this video, and ring the bell.